"Cut the drums," the man said, his voice flat as a blade. He stepped forward and snapped his fingers. 2 boys overturned the calabashes of food, scattering grain into the dust, while he laughed at the thin girl standing beside the cheap altar. "Look at her hands," he went on, loud enough for everyone. "No gold, no cows, no shame." He leaned closer to her face, so close his breath touched her cheek. "By sundown, this wedding will be a warning." People froze. No one challenged him, not even when he raised his cane and pointed it at the groom's covered face. But what Kosa did not know was, if you're listening to this from far away, from a city, a suburb, maybe a small town, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I want you close for this part, because what you just heard, that kind of cruelty, doesn't belong to one place. It lives wherever power feels unchallenged and silence does the work of fists. Stay with me, because what followed that threat is the kind of thing people still lower their voices about, even now. The girl's name was Sade, and the place sat along a narrow road that curved around a marketplace before dropping toward a slow river. Each morning, women arrived before dawn, laying cloth and peppers in the half-light. Each evening, elders gathered under a single, wide tree to settle small disputes before they grew teeth. The people depended on the rhythm of days, the opening of stalls, the pounding of yam, the short walk to the river for water. And over everything hung the knowledge of Iwa. Those who broke it learned quickly that honor was not carried in the mouth, but in the way others stepped toward or away from you. Sade lived at the edge of the compound land, in a room whose walls had been repaired so many times the clay showed hands. Her habit was simple. Every morning, before she left for the market, she swept the same short stretch of earth in front of her door. She did it even when no one passed that way. She did it even when the broom was worn thin. People noticed, though no one thanked her. They noticed because order has a way of accusing those who lack it. At the market, the women counted her measure twice. They pressed her palm to check for empty space where a coin might hide. When a pot cracked, eyes turned towards her. When a child fell, someone whispered her name. Sade never answered whispers. She bowed when spoken to and waited until the other person finished before lifting her face. Once, when a woman tried to accuse her of stealing a handful of salt, Sade held out both palms, empty, and said only, "If I took it, my hands would remember." The woman frowned, then turned away, unsettled more than satisfied. The man she was to marry kept his face covered when he came to the market road. He wore a cloth mask tied behind his head, leaving only his eyes visible. He did not speak often. He carried his things himself. When mocked, he stood still until the sound lost interest. Some said he was ashamed. Some said he was cursed. Kosa said nothing at first. He watched. Kosa had grown strong in that place on the backs of others' caution. His father had once held a small title. Kosa held the fear that remained when respect rotted. He managed the road toll near the river crossing and took more than needed. He convinced himself it was to protect order. He convinced himself that poverty was contagious. If he crushed one poor wedding publicly, others would think twice. The first harm came quietly. On market day, Kosa told the women to refuse Sade credit. No shouting, no accusation, just a closing of hands. Sade stood longer than usual by her small pile of tomatoes, watching buyers pass. When the sun shifted, she counted what remained and tied them back into cloth. That night, she ate only boiled leaves. The next morning, she swept. No one spoke to her about it. That was the dread. Silence grew weight. When her intended approached the compound that evening, Kosa's boys followed him at a distance. They did not touch him. They laughed behind their hands. The mask did not move. By the following week, Kosa had chosen his moment. At the evening gathering, he spoke as if clearing his throat. "We must talk about standards," he said. Faces lifted. "A wedding brings families together. It feeds mouths. What happens when there is nothing there?" He let the question hang. Someone coughed. Someone else shifted. Kosa smiled as if benevolence had arrived. "Let the girl wait," he continued. "Let her prove she can carry a household." A murmur ran like a small animal. Sade stood at the edge, her feet pressed together. When her name was spoken, she bowed. She did not plead. She listened as dates were moved, promises loosened. At the peak of it, when Kosa raised his cane and tapped the ground, an old woman near the tree muttered, "The hen that forgets the hawk does not grow old." No one answered her. The proverb stood where objection could not. That was when the unexpected ally first hesitated. His name was Tunde, and he stood behind Kosa holding a ledger. He had learned to shut his mouth early in life. His hands held the book steady, but the skin at his jaw tightened when Sade bowed too long. The final harm broke what could not be mended quietly. On the morning of the wedding, the date Sade refused to move again, Kosa arrived before the drums. He ordered the benches taken, he ordered the fire stamped out, he told the boys to pour water over the decorations. When Sade stepped forward to ask that at least the elders be allowed to sit, Kosa lifted his cane, then paused. For a breath, he looked toward the masked groom. The eyes watching him did not blink. "Enough," Kosa said finally, and he swung. The cane caught Sade's shoulder. The sound was small, but it traveled. People recoiled, bodies turning away in the same instant. The groom did not move. When Kosa pointed at him again, his voice sharpened. "You bring your shame here, covered like a thief. Leave." Sade stood alone, the space around her clear. That night, she sat in her room, breath slow, shoulder burning. The one thought she allowed herself was thin and sharp. If Iwa meant anything at all, it would have to speak with hands. The riverbank was full the next day. News travels on feet. Kosa came dressed for display. The masked groom stood beside Sade, his cloth still tied. Tunde held the ledger. When Kosa spoke, the groom reached up and untied the cloth. Gasps rippled as the face emerged. Scarred, yes, but carrying the marks of a man who had stood inside fire and walked back out. Kosa's cane wavered. The groom's eyes found him. What followed was not a speech. It was a list. Names, dates, weights. Tunde opened the ledger, hands trembling, and read what he had been forced to copy for years. Coins skimmed, food withheld, titles sold twice. People pressed closer. One by one, faces changed. A woman covered her mouth. A man stepped back. When the elders spoke, their voices were quiet. They asked Kosa to sit. He did not. He tried to laugh. No sound came. Guards took his cane. Someone shoved him. He fell into the shallow water at the edge of the river, robes soaked, dignity dragged down by its own weight. The groom watched without expression. Later, under the tree, the elders lifted Sade's chin and told her to stand where she could see everyone. "The river does not forget its source," one said, and the proverb settled like a stone in the right place. Tunde stepped forward and placed the ledger at her feet. He did not look up. In the weeks that followed, Sade kept sweeping, but now the stretch of earth grew. Neighbors moved their stools closer to her door. When the drums played again, they played full. The groom remained masked only when it pleased him. Children learned his name by watching him fix a broken roof without being asked. In the weeks after, Kosa remained out of sight. People said he stayed in a cousin's compound across the hills, his fine robes traded for borrowed cloth, his voice shortened by caution. When he returned months later, it was not with a procession, but on foot, alone. He stood at the back of the market road, watching others collect the toll he once guarded so fiercely. Some noticed him and turned their backs. Others stared without greeting. The road itself did not seem to recognize him. Tunde changed first in ways that were easy to miss. He no longer stood behind anyone when disputes were settled. He began sitting where his whole body could be seen. When asked to keep records, he asked whose eyes would be allowed to read them. It cost him. Men who once slapped his shoulder stopped calling his name. Yet, when a traitor accused him of hiding numbers, 3 women stepped forward and said they had seen him count twice. Tunde nodded once, a small bow that did not seek applause. As for the groom, his mask appeared less and less. Children stopped staring at the scars and began watching his hands instead, the way he tied rope cleanly, the way he handed tools back with care. One afternoon, when a boy laughed and asked why he ever covered his face, the man answered without heat, "Some things are not for first meetings." The boy frowned, thinking on this, and carried the words home. Sade's doubt returned once, quietly, late at night. The compound was full now, laughter drifting where emptiness used to settle. She wondered if all this balance could tip again. She rose before dawn and swept. When the broom struck a stone, she paused, then moved it aside, clearing the path rather than forcing it straight. At the next season's gathering, the elders called her forward, not to praise her, but to ask her to speak on a small dispute between neighbors. Sade listened longer than expected. When she finally spoke, it was a single sentence. "Say what you did, not what you felt." The argument loosened, then fell apart. Later, an elder nodded once, approving without announcing it. People still tell the wedding story, but they no longer center Kosa when they do. They speak of the silence before the mask was untied, of the ledger hitting the ground, of the moment when many small fears stepped backwards at the same time. And when someone asks what lesson it carries, others just shake their heads and say, "If you saw it, you would know." Long after the river returned to its lazy pace, Sade was seen one morning standing still with her broom resting against her shoulder, watching the road fill by itself. The last thing anyone remembers is small. Sade lifting the broom at dawn, pausing, and setting it down because the ground was already clean. If you stayed with this story, I want to know one thing. Which moment changed everything for you? The silence, the strike, or the river? Share it below, and if stories like this matter to you, like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one we tell together.